This is the Authentic Dating series brought to you by Ahmad and David,
where we explore what it takes to have a dating life you're excited about.
Hey guys, I'm David.
I'm Ahmad.
And this is the Authentic Dating series.
We have a very special guest episode for you today with the amazing Stefanos Sifandos.
Yeah, we had a recording with him it feels like a few days ago. I think it was a few days ago, where we really got into the inner details about the fear of rejection and how that influences men in their dating lives. And it was just such a powerful sitting to speak to a man with such wisdom and experience, and he really comes at the issue from multiple levels. Like, I know, you hear about the fear of rejection and people are like, what do I need to do? He hits it on that level of like what you need to do, hits you on the level of like looking at your emotions and what's going on there and your beliefs, and also going into a level of a kind of psychological and physiological issue of where this kind of rejection and fear is just being held, and how you can kind of rid yourself of this on the long term.
Yeah, what I really love about what Stefanos brings to this podcast is his personal experience, because everything that he's talking about, he's really coming from his own journey of discovering for himself, like what is going on inside of him, what drives him as a man. And actually, what was really interesting was how he brought up this thing, which it seems to be very important information for all men today, which is about the masculine and feminine energy dynamic that exists in all of us. And so you guys are in for a real treat on this episode, because he really goes deep. Like, there are a lot of people who just talk about fear of rejection from a standpoint of actions to do and what I would call surface level. Whereas I really feel like, not just feel, I know, having hosted this podcast, like, he went so deep, and even I on this podcast felt like he was like I was listening and learning as he was talking. It was an amazing experience.
Yeah, me too. I was listening and just like taking in some of the wisdom of what he was saying. It's like, oh wow, there's still things in here that, there's always things to be learning and things to be kind of imprinted in life. But I really felt like listening to him, and I really enjoy his content. I listen to go to his Instagram quite often and watch his videos. That will be in the show notes down below. I highly recommend you check that out, as well as our Instagram. Obviously, if you're a new listener here, we are Authentic Dating Series. I'm David, and obviously Ahmad. We both co-host this, and we're all about really helping men, basically empowering them in their dating lives. When we teach kind of a complete model, from back to front, from meeting to relationships, in a model that like allows men to take control and have power of their dating lives, and not just feel like that the mercy of what happens around them and what's going on in the world and what's going on in the circumstances, and allow them to show up in a way that is completely attractive to the opposite sex in just being themselves, and tuning into like the authentic self that's behind all the things they're told they shouldn't be or how they should act and so forth, and allowing them to just express that.
Beautiful. And just a note as well, before we jump into the episode, because it's, at this current moment in time, depending on when you're listening to this episode, we're currently going through lockdown and we're in Corona. And for the first good 18 minutes, Stefanos really reveals to us how he's been dealing with Corona, and actually some really valuable information, which is in addition to the topic of the episode, which is about rejection. So if you want to get straight into the topic on rejection, you can just fast forward about 18 minutes. And you'll get straight to it. But I really recommend you hear what he has to say about the current times we're living in.
Yeah, some really great kind of concepts and ideas, and actually how to expand out of this current time and expand as yourself, because there's as he says, there's a period of contraction where everyone's just like holding on, and there's an opportunity here to expand into a bigger sense of who you are. So without further ado, we'll jump straight into the episode. Hey guys, so we've got a very, very special guest with us. I'm going to ask him to introduce himself because I don't want to get his name wrong. He's got such a strong name.
It's very strong.
Stefanos Sifandos.
What a strong name.
That
I feel like
strong.
you would have been a gladiator back in the day.
Yeah,
I feel like that sometimes.
I was saying to David before, I was like, man, I can imagine you getting told off when you were young and someone saying your name in a strong way. Stefanos.
You said it perfectly.
Oh, good. Yeah. Yeah. So how are you doing?
So yeah, so mm,
Oh, we both spoke.
Yeah, I'm well, man. It's for me, like I was saying to you gentlemen earlier, it's very interesting times that we are in right now. And I mean, I've been working from home for a number of years, and so being in my place, albeit I've been in different places the last few years, um, it, it really nothing's massively changed. Yet I feel this constriction, this
mm,
restriction in my movement in the world a little bit. And I can feel that. I can see it. I'm in Austin, Texas, in the US. So I live in the US now,
Mm,
and I can feel there's just something different. I'm not going out as much, and not because I have this massive fear of a virus. It's really not so much to do with that. It's just more the energetics of the place. So I feel pretty blessed where I am, and honestly, it's pretty quiet and calm here. There's not a heightened sense of fear. I mean, I was in LA
mm,
not long ago, and LA is a lot denser.
mm,
There's a lot of density in LA, and fear. You can feel it energetically, and you can see it what's
mm,
happening in the streets. And I know I feel pretty blessed where I am, but again, the US is getting it's getting hit pretty hard in different ways. Culturally, socially, economically. Um, I mean, geopolitically, academically. It's an interesting time to be alive, is what I'll say.
mm.
mm, mm,
Yeah.
mm,
So I think the key word, I know the key word that they use over here in the UK is unprecedented. Unprecedented times. I was actually
Unprecedented,
counting.
yeah.
Yeah, I was counting the syllables in that before. It's like it's the longest word they've used in the media for a long time. But yeah, but it rings true. It's like it really is unprecedented times. I
Mm,
mean, we've never experienced anything like this. Very very quickly. I think for most of us, we what we felt was it was like a war. It was like war times. We're
mm,
rationing stuff.
mm,
We're panic buying. Things are harder
mm,
to get hold of. We went from just to we won't. I mean, the topic of today is not this, but like just as a point, like we literally went from Amazon trucks on the road, like where you can get anything
yeah,
anytime, and we're living in that now culture
yeah.
to just complete lockdown and essentials only. And so
mm,
yeah, I feel like that constriction that you expressed, like yeah, I feel that that's something like worldwide, which again is unprecedented. Like everyone at the same time feeling the actual energetic constriction of the world is yeah, it's quite
mm.
something.
Mm,
Everyone's just pulling inwards for and like almost holding on to whatever they've got, like the energy they have. No one's looking to expand right now.
Mm,
That's the general
mm,
feeling,
yeah.
which is a shame.
Collectively,
mm,
that's right,
Which is
and that's
just,
why I'm really very deliberately looking at where can I expand in my life. Where can I add
mm,
value to my own life? Where can I add value to the lives of others? That's expansion for me. Where can I continue to grow and not contract and feel that I'm not contributing to the evolution of my own path, or that I'm taking action from a place of intense and immense fear, whilst at the same time wanting to respect what little convoluted and conflicting information we do understand about what's actually
mm,
happening. And
mm,
so there's a balance there, but that's a practice too. Like we get to practice that. I get to practice that. I think
mm,
that's an important part for it's a reframe on what is actually happening in the world as well.
mm, mm. It's a
mm,
really good point. Mm. How to, and it's a real practice in like managing the fear that's coming from outwards towards you, and then managing your
Mm,
own kind of fears and worries that are coming up. It's like a real practice of like, how do you say, I know this isn't even the topic for today, but it's like, how do you go, okay, there's all this fear and worry outside, and I'm happy for it to, I can't do anything about that, but I can manage my own self and my own emotions and how I react to those.
mm.
mm,
Yeah, that's what we have control over and mastery is our internal faculties. So why not focus on that? There's no massive point at the moment. I think there's a balancing act, men. I think the balancing act is yes, let's arrive to a level of acceptance of what is happening, which is turbulent change to some degree. It's actually not that turbulent. It's actually quite slow, but appears fast-ish, but not really. Um, accept change, but let's not be complacent. And at the same time, let's not resign. Let's not carry resignation in our posturing in the world, because that to me is a weakness, and that to me is us not being free thinking beings, us not contemplating possibilities of where can we take our lives and where can we take the collective. And that's just saying that's us being victims and in this hopeless helpless mentality and space. And I'm not buying into that, and I don't want to buy into that. And that's a very active choice I make. It's a fine line too. Like, it's not, I'm not insinuating it's easy. It's not. I'm challenged by it. I'm sure many others are as well. And it is a fine line around acceptance and resignation and walking that fine line. However, we have to pay attention to that. Otherwise, this is the way I see it. When I speak to masculine, feminine dynamics, I look at so masculinity as an energetic, that masculinity and femininity is an energetic that resides within every single human being. It's just contrasted expressive states. It's two sides of the same coin. And we've been very much in a hyper extreme expression of masculinity for some time now, in terms of oppression, control, autocracy, subjugation, excessive violence, etc. Right? And now we're in this hyper passive place. We're just resigning to the fact that, we're going to be victims, we're going to be helpless, we're going to be hopeless. That's it's an extreme unhealthy feminine posture. So we're just oscillating between these extremes right now, and we've got to be aware of it in order to shift it and say, okay, well, what can we do to cultivate greater awareness within ourselves to then take action from a more meaningful, healthy place. And again, I'm not saying it's easy, it's fucking challenging. But if we don't start giving thought to this and attention to this, we're going to get stuck in a cycle that we're not going to be very happy with long term.
Because we'll keep kind of oscillating between this. Something else will come along and we'll swing back into this because everyone has experienced this state and will quite quickly move back to it.
Well, that was a powerful start to the conversation. I appreciate your words. It's not something that I considered from a masculine and feminine dynamic, but it's coincidentally we just ran an event, which we have these events we do called Man Up, and they're uplifting talks for men. And the last topic was exactly that: how the world has been in a very dominant masculine place, and how do men how to be a man in what we call the era of women. And we were referring to the women empowerment, but also the rise of feminine energy and how men should encapsulate that. So it's very interesting to hear your perspective on actually the current climate, because I hadn't twigged it in that sense. But yeah, my initial reaction to how things have been is to surrender, because when I first felt the feeling of chaos, or rather the feeling of powerlessness, or things are outside of my control right now, and I don't know how to normalize what's happening, because it couldn't be normalized, because it's just happening and it's unfolding. My instinct was then to surrender and to allow the situation to just be, to actually allow the situation to be, and allow myself to unfold inside of that, which is, for me personally, has given me a lot of peace.
Yeah, I think it's powerful. I think there's a balance there as well. And I think if that's where you're at the moment, that's great. I think, again, we've come from these extremes. I would put a lens of masculinity, femininity again to it, because I feel that as society, collectively and individually, we're wanting to move towards harmony and balance. And what that looks like for me is, if we're talking about healthy masculine postures, what does the world need right now? From my perspective, it needs clean, transparent communication. It needs structure. It needs rigidity, but not in a negative way, but more in a positive way. So rigidity in terms of, we need healthy direction, clarity in that direction, and we need to be moving in that direction. However, we need the ability to also be nimble as well. We need the ability to be adaptive. And that adaptation is the nimbleness is more of a feminine trait per se. But if we look at continuing the line of masculinity, what we actually really need right now, again, with a healthy communication, the transparent communication, the leadership, the structure, the routine, the confidence, the consistency in behavior. But we also need compassion. We also need that surrendering. The surrendering for me is surrendering to what was, the old, letting the old go, putting the old behind. We don't need to go back to what was. We don't need to go back to normalcy or normality. We have to create a new normal, and we get to do that together So how we do that really depends on us, but I believe a big part of that is coming into a deeper sense of self and balance.
I love that. Yeah, I think hopefully out of this comes leadership that's like leadership with compassion and love for all, and not just leadership with greed and a want for more and more and using resources and consuming.
Yeah, we've been consuming massively. We've been too fast. We've got to slow things down. We've been way too fast in the extraction of resources, the production of resources, the distribution of resources. Our values as a collective has been on more speed, more iteration, more innovation. Nothing wrong with that, but it's come at the expense of um, us compromising some very important values, such as our health, such as our families, community, such as abandoning Mother Earth, just which is our life support system for how we express in the world. So for our consciousness to be housed in outside of our bodies are housed in Earth. So there's a lot that's going on right now. A lot.
Cool. So we actually completely forgot to ask how you got into the work that you do. We just jumped straight into the conversation, Stefanos.
Yeah, I got into this field of work. So I've been interested in the human condition, the human mind for a very long time. Since I was a kid, I wanted to be the United Nations Secretary General, not because, as I grew up, I realized geopolitically the UN isn't necessarily the most reputable organization, and it's also not a bad organization by any means. I just started to understand more the reason as a kid why I wanted to be the leader of the UN, because I saw the UN as this global superpower that could end pain and suffering and hunger. And in my own childhood, I experienced a lot of that. So I thought if I could do that for others, then I would do that for myself. And so I had a yearning to really help people and support people and also myself on that journey and understand the human condition and the human mind and why we behave the way we do and how we think the way we think and does God exist and what is God? Just asking some really big existential esoteric questions and that never really stopped and it hasn't stopped. I'm still asking big questions. I'm still seeking. I'm being more than I'm seeking these days, but I'm an avid explorer of the internal and external world. And so why I came into this essentially was pain. Our voids become our values. Our voids as children become our values as adults and what drives us. And I remember very succinctly Dr. John DeMartini saying that, and it really resonated true for me because I started looking at my life. I looked at how I was very isolated and disconnected and felt very alone and felt very, very weak as well, very helpless, and then as an adult wanted to serve and wanted to be a voice for the voiceless and wanted to feel connection and unity and expansion in my own self and in my community. And that really drove me. And once I equilibrated all that and really cleared up the unhealthy shadow attachment to all that, I realized I still want to do this stuff. It still feels really good. And it was more than just being a neurological or behavioral habit. It was something that was one of the reasons why I felt I was here. And all the things that happened to me as a child actually will really happen for me. And as they happened for me, and I was able to realize that later and go through the feeling process and release the trauma somatically and feel and forgive and go through all that process and reframe, rewire, etc. I saw that I wouldn't be where I was without all of those experiences and more. And so that's really where, for me, this work started and continues. And then I've had certain experiences in my life that have really been shocks for me, major shocks and catalysts for deepening my own awareness and my own practice and also my own service and how I show up in the world. And those catalysts have been very painful. They've been very intense, and they've been multiple rock bottom moments that have been, again, suicide, close to suicide, obviously not suicide, I'm still here. A complete reframing of self, loss of identity, loss of business loss of money, bankruptcy, like lots of loss, right? Stripping back the ego self, stripping back the layers of who am I really, and the identity and the way that I've been in the world. So just a lot, a lot, right?
A lot.
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
A lot of living.
a lot of
Yeah.
living, a lot of living, and I'm very
Mm.
grateful for that. I really am. I'm really grateful for that.
Wow.
So it sounds like it's been some beautiful lessons for you.
Yeah, to say the least. To say the least.
Mm.
Yeah.
They don't always feel like that at the time, but you
No.
can look back on them and always know that, without those things, you wouldn't be where you are today and who you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. At the time, it's, oh, poor me, I'm a victim, and I couldn't budget. But once I really went beyond that, I managed to budget. I managed to shift a lot. Yeah, and that was a really beautiful thing for me. That served me a great deal.
Wow. I mean,
Beautiful.
I can really hear, how you were able to take those moments and channel them into who you are today. And actually, it's an important lesson, because so many of us get caught up in like, why me, or these things shouldn't happen, and then we don't get to get the lesson, or we don't get to get the beauty of where it takes us or how it shapes us in our lives. I mean, I think of that from the perspective of how Dave and I got started on this podcast. Dave and I have very different backgrounds. With I always say, like, David being very confident with women, and me, I always was very stiff and shy at school. But that experience has taught me a lot about what it takes to build up my character and to overcome the boundaries, or even the stories that I tell myself. In fact, I think, like, one of my superpowers nowadays is I can feel awkward and just talk about it and share. and it's not something that I would have recognized as being as a power before, but actually it just makes me more human in general. So I really love that. Yeah, thanks for sharing. I really love your open sharing.
Thank you.
And actually, I mean, it's great that we have you on for this for the topic of today. What we really wanted to get into, and as I was expressing to you a little bit earlier, was we interviewed, in fact, a whole bunch of our listeners to find out, like, what was really going on for them. And one of the key topics that a lot of men expressed to us was how they feared rejection. And this fear of rejection, especially, obviously, we're talking in the perspective of dating, but obviously it shows up in other areas of life. So firstly, like, I mean, from your perspective, I'm really keen to find out, like, what is the fear of rejection all about?
For men specific, I mean, it's for me, rejection is a core wound or a core fear, alongside loss or abandonment, and or humiliation, as another example. For me, men, I mean, there are many reasons why men have a deep fear. Rejection, abandonment, humiliation are big core woundings for men. And when you look at us as from an evolutionary perspective, from a biological perspective, which is part of the story, it's not all of the story. We're sort of built to, I don't want to say dominate our environment, but we're built to be masters of our domain, of our physical environment, particularly our physical environment. And so if we don't feel chosen, or if we don't feel chosen by the people in our environment, the people in the space that we are, if we're not adored, and it's not an ego thing per se, it's almost like it's I don't want to say hardwired, but it's almost like it's part of us, generation. If we aren't able to please others, right? So much of our self-worth is tied up in that, and so much of our sense of self is tied up in contribution, more than we actually know. Because when we look at, again, from an evolutionary perspective, when we look at our contribution as men, as males, we've been responsible for extending the perimeter, keeping the physical environment safe, survival and flourishing, discovering and discovering new lands and creating new innovations out in the world. And so if we're not adored or if we're not appreciated, we feel very, very, very disconnected. If we don't feel special, if we don't feel heroic, we feel that we're not worthy, that we're not enough. And then we feel this rejection that comes on. It's like it's a failure of our masculinity. It's a failure of our male expression in the world. And we're almost taught this culturally through birth as well, And so many of us, I mean, we almost feel we're not enough. That's a big thing. Like if we're
Big
not
one.
winning, if we're not the best, if we're not the richest, if we're not getting all the women, if we're not all these ridiculous notions of what it means to be healthy, right? They're not. They're extreme expressions in a world that advocates competition above so many other values, right? Then we're not worth it, and we feel rejected, and it fucking eats at us, right? Like we, as adults, we get to choose who we want to be in the world. But we're so influenced by our outside. We're so influenced by media. We're so influenced by our peers, by community, by what the world tells us we need to be, that we're trying to be this person that we either don't want to be or are really struggling to be or are going down that path in the quote unquote wrong way. And it doesn't really serve us. And so we're experiencing this rejection of others saying, hey, not today, or hey, they're not meaning to say you're not good enough, but they're just pushing their values on us, and we're taking it personally. Because another issue, and I don't mean to go on too many tangents, but there's so many interconnected aspects to this, is as children, we're not taught how to emotionally self-regulate. So when we receive feedback from our environment, we interpret it as rejection, and we internalize it and shame ourselves for it. We make ourselves wrong. But it's not really us that's wrong. People, like, for example, right, like, Ahmad, I say to you, you say to me, oh, Steph, I don't really like basketball. And let's just say I'm an avid basketball fan. And all of a sudden I start taking personally, say, what's wrong with you? What do you mean you don't like basketball? Why would you? I start taking it personally. Man, basketball's so good. I'm trying to convince you to like something because I'm so invested in it. And I think that's so part of my identity that I think you're attacking me, but you don't even fucking know me. You just don't like basketball because all of these experiences that you've had leading up to who you are today has informed you that you're not interested in basketball. But we take rejection personally. I even argue, I don't even know if rejection actually exists, or if it's a figment of our imagination, because people come with preconceived values, ideas, notions, interpretations of experiences, unconscious and conscious, millions and millions and millions of bits of information coming through to us that we don't even process consciously, that inform who we are in the world and how we treat others, what we're attracted to and what we push away and repel. And so with all of that said, are we really being rejected? But let's continue the conversation of rejection. Like, why are we why do we experience romantic rejection? Some people say that men experience romantic rejection, or not just romantic rejection, but intimate emotional rejection more than women. I don't know about that. Or they don't, or they do. I think we experience rejection based on how we are raised and how we interpret the experiences that we have, right? A lot of men, because they're not taught how to emotionally regulate, and that sadness and fear are not feelings to feel, most men suppress all these other ranges of feelings with anger. And so when we're rejected, we go to anger, and then that becomes an addictive cycle. It's like, oh, I'm rejected, angry, and we become addicted to the anger because the anger gives us power and control. And so we almost then unconsciously look for rejection because it gives us an excuse or a reason to be angry. So we feed the anger with the rejection, and so then we become addicted to the rejection, or we become addicted to the cycle, or the power, rather, the feeling that it gives us, right? But we have to understand that all of us struggle with rejection, and it's part of who we are, right? It's part of working through. It's part of working through stuff, working through our lives. I think rejection is normal.
Yep.
There's just something I want to clarify, because I know it's not something. I think what you said there was amazing. Like there was some really good points, but there was just one thing you said early on, which was about wounds. Just to clarify, what did you mean by wounds?
So, for example, I'll use me as an example. So as a kid, I was in a very violent home. So very volatile, turbulent, violent home. Parents were violent with each other. Parents were violent with me and my brother. There was abandonment there. There was emotional unavailability and physical unavailability for my father. So that formed a wound that I carried into my adult life that was repressed and left unchecked. And so the psyche, the way it dealt with that for me was through coping strategies. We all use coping strategies, but we use different coping strategies. For me, I retracted for a period of time. I retracted from the world and became very shy. I was always wanting to make other people happy because I didn't want to upset anyone. Because I also learned very quickly that if I make my parents happy, then chances of me getting hit or hurt were less. And so it's a coping strategy, but that's a wound that I didn't really deal with. I didn't have a healthy outlet for. I wasn't seen. I carried low self-esteem, low self-confidence. Hit my teenage years, I became more aggressive. I had enough. I was bullied. I became the bully. I became aggressive. I started fighting a lot. I started getting my power back in a different way, in a hyper way, in an extreme way. And that carried on into my probably mid to late 20s. And then I started doing some deep work around that and started looking at, why am I behaving this way? Why am I so aggressive? Why am I so frustrated? Why am I so short-tempered, so impatient? Why do I want to fight all the time? And it was just repressed stuff. I was angry at my parents, angry at my upbringing, angry at whatever. And I had a lot of trapped anger. But then someone would say, but you're angry all the time. What do you mean you have trapped anger? But my anger wasn't being expressed in a way that was conducive to what was actually the core wounding, which was feeling abandoned, feeling not enough, feeling consistently humiliated, I had the gamut of core wounding, the fear of loss because I was disconnected from my family, my uncles and aunties, which I loved, that gave me so much security as well. So I had a lot of that, and I'm not alone in that. And man, most of my clients, their childhood has been a lot more intense than mine. It's not, and I'm not downplaying my experiences. I'm saying many of us, we have unresolved wounding.
Yeah, I think you just made me realize that I must still have some wounding from when I was beaten as a child. Like I did, and I smile, but actually, like there's a resonance there of what you just said. I was like, damn, actually, yeah, I've done a lot of work on myself, but actually, there is still stuff there in that I haven't conceptualized in that way. So yeah, that's really good. Thanks.
Yeah, and it's like when you were saying about emotional unavailability, it's like my father was, I've known this for years. My dad is just an emotionally unavailable man. And I saw how I carried that into my 20s and into my relationships. And I was always emotionally unavailable. And I can just see the havoc that it caused on my relationships. And it's like, it's only really in the last kind of, 3.5 years that I've really gone, the beauty of being emotionally available and vulnerable is actually deep connection with the women that I meet. And that is the most beautiful thing that I can really experience and bring to the world.
Nice.
Yeah.
Rejection. Before we get sidetracked again, I know we can.
It's a teacher.
I feel with rejection, it's like a lot of the time there's an internalization for a lot of men around rejection, and it just slips into sadness. Like we coach guys in their dating, and a lot of the time there's a story around what will happen if they're rejected. And they carry this around. So you talk to them about, I don't know, you go and talk to a girl somewhere in a bar, on the street, whatever, and they're like, no. If I get rejected, it's going to mean X, Y, and Z about who I am. She's going to think I'm this and that and blah, blah, blah. And when you really delve into it, there's this story that's been created out of fragments of movies they've seen, things they've heard someone else say, but it's not actually any experience they've actually had. And it can take so much to work through that, even when you get them into situations where they don't experience the rejection and it doesn't happen, because there's also times where there's the interpretation of rejection that hasn't actually happened. Because we're so attached to our story, we want to be right so much about being rejected all the time that we start to just make it up in the world. Like, oh, look, someone looked at me, they rejected me. I tried to buy something with someone and they didn't really want my money, they rejected me. And it's like, it's that replaying of the story that we have that really causes more damage than any kind of real kind of quote unquote rejection, which, I feel like we all kind of agreed that rejection of yourself and who you are doesn't really happen. It's more a rejection of what you've put on offer.
What we feel is being rejected. Yeah. So we need to understand that rejection is something that's very, it's biological, right? And it is psychological, but it's also It's biological, and the human brain often is faced with rejection, and when it is faced with rejection, it falls apart because it's as I mentioned, it's one of the core human fears, alongside abandonment and loss as two examples. And as we have this inclination to belong, to be part of the in-group, because it's an in-group, out-group mentality, right? Which is very, very important to understand. We never want to be part of the out-group. We never want to be part of the out-group. Being part of the out-group means that we're not going to probably survive. And so it's very visceral for us. It's very painful for us. And so we want to belong, this sense and this inclination, biological and cultural, to belong to a family, to a peer group, to a community, to society, to a loved one, to children, whatever it is. And fearing rejection from any of these major groups that we want to be a part of, it almost makes us paranoid. Now, if we, it confirms our worst fear, essentially, that we're not lovable, that we're not good enough, that we're of little value. And when these fears, these thoughts, they get momentum in our minds, especially if we don't have healthy ways to deal with them and ways to express them and move them from our bodies, we get fucking hooked on that. And so in getting hooked on that, we create scenarios, micro scenarios within our environment to prepare us for something more. So our brain is a pattern recognizing machine. Our brain looks for patterns that it's familiar with that possibly could be unsafe in order to protect us. And so it's almost looking for this. And we have to break that habit. And the way we break that habit is that we realize that we're more than that rejection. That's one of the ways. Obviously, we begin with awareness, right? And then we have practices, and we do some inner child work, and we do the healing work and the wounding work. And we start to explore ourselves beyond just, okay, if I am being rejected, quote unquote, being rejected, what does that mean? Or what am I making it mean? And what could I make it mean? So there's a lot to that, right?
Yeah.
I feel like AJ, you're going to say something.
No. I was actually pondering on the different terms that he just said. Like, for example, like the inner child work. That sounds fascinating. Could you tell us a bit more about that? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah. So when we're talking about trauma and we're talking about trauma-informed therapy, we're looking at how our past experiences, to some degree, shape who we are today. And so if you've experienced trauma as a child or during your developmental years, or even as an adult, maybe one of my clients, as an adult in his late 30s, he experienced PTSD, trauma, post-traumatic stress syndrome, trauma when a coworker died in his arms.
Wow.
And that was traumatic for him. And so that as an adult in his mid to late 30s. So trauma isn't just when we're children. Trauma resides on a spectrum. How you interpret trauma can be very different to how the next person does. Trauma doesn't have to be growing up in a war-torn country or being locked in a basement for 25 years and raped and all these extreme things that we sometimes hear. Of course, that's traumatic, but trauma can also be coming home from school and saying, look, mum and dad, I got a B, and your mum and dad saying, oh, why didn't you get an A? And then doing that a number of times, not from a place of malice, but, oh, why didn't you get an A? Oh, well, you can do better next time. I'm sure you will. Instead of supporting that person, they form this idea of themselves that they're not good enough. And so then the way they act and the way they behave, the way they pursue success, it's predicated on this notion of deficit and scarcity and fear. It's not actually predicated on a healthy sense of self and a pursuit because they want to expand. We spoke about expansion earlier, right? It's very much not that at all. And so they want to control everything, and they're controlling from a place of fear. So when we're talking about inner child work, we're talking about, I have an understanding, my theory, if you like, or our inner child, the health of our inner child, it directly informs the present moment nervous system. And so when we look at our psyche, we're compartmentalized, particularly if you look at Gestalt style therapy, okay? And so there's parts of us that exist within the whole of who we are. And these parts, they, depending on which one has the loudest voice, will speak in a way that directs and informs the experiences that you have. And so the health of our inner child, that little boy or girl that experienced turbulence or violence or trauma of any kind, if they feel unsafe, they'll constantly be pulling and nagging at your nervous system, i.e. your stress hormones circulating through your body, in a more consistent way to prepare you to be ready for more trauma because it's unresolved. And so they don't feel safe, and so they want to be prepared. And so how they feel safe or how they feel safer is by being prepared or being on edge. And so you know that when you're on edge, like all of us know when we're on edge, we're scattered, we're not approachable, we're irritable, we're sad, we're angry, we're in fear, we are erratic, we're irrational. We're more towards that than we are rational, grounded, safe, consistent. We move away from those more stable emotions or expressive states. And so if we can have conversations, literally as adults, have conversations with those little parts of us, and there's different techniques that I use with my clients as well, psycho-emotional techniques and deeper practices where you're communicating with that inner child and helping him or her feel safe and going back, not to relive traumatic experiences, but to express the feelings that were suppressed at the time because they were interpreted as too much by the brain. So we interpret the world in two ways generally: cognitively and intellectually, where we're laying down neuronal pathways, and then somatically, viscerally, cellularly. And at a cellular level, we interpret the world. So trauma, for example, is not just stored in the mind as memories, explicit or implicit, known or unknown, but it's also stored in the body at a cellular level. So you can rewrite the stories of your past. That's great, and reframe and rewire, and because the brain's very plastic, and forgive your parents if there's a parental issue there and so forth. But if you don't release those trapped emotions that were like in shock, that fight, flight, freeze, that weren't properly expressed at the time and didn't move through your nervous system, that still influences how you behave. And so there's more than just one component to releasing trauma. So you can have a conversation with your inner child, but then you've got to do the somatic work. So breath work can shift that, particular styles of shaking, anger release work, emotional release techniques. And these help move the energy through somatically because it's that trapped energy, right? And so doing that helps the inner child, helps that part of our psyche feel safe. When we feel safe, we make decisions from a place of spaciousness and creativity. When we're in fear, we're restricted. Like right now, the world's in fear. What are we doing? We're reacting. We're not responding, we're reacting. Now, I don't think there are many heads of government thinking, okay, we have a situation here. We weren't prepared for it. We have to respond fast to it. Let's not come from fear. And at the same time, let's observe the holes in our systems and the gaps in our systems and potentially move to rectify them at the same time whilst we're being responsive. We're in survival mode right now, so we're not doing that. We're not carrying healthy foresight, which is a masculine trait. We're being highly reactive right now. And so we're panicking, coming from fear, and we're trying to build surplus or abundance back. We're trying to be, governments particularly are trying to be seen as the heroes, and it's good, but it's also, I don't want to use the terms good and bad. There's healthy aspects and unhealthy aspects to it. So back to what I was saying about the inner child, as you asked. So we want to be working with that inner child on a regular basis, because then it fortifies our wisdom and it fortifies and makes us more resilient as human beings. And we don't take things so personally because we have a deeper understanding of what's actually happening. And instead of showing up to a relationship, an interpersonal relationship, or even a relationship to ourselves from fear, and when say, we've all been in an argument or a confrontation with a loved one, maybe a lover or a beloved, right? And they're expressing their fears, and maybe they're getting a little heated, and then all of a sudden you get heated and you start getting triggered. That word triggered, your stuff starts coming up. What do you mean? Well, maybe it's my fault. Maybe it's me that's not good enough. And then all of a sudden you start reacting from that place. But it's actually got fuck all to do with you. It's just that she's expressing her pain and fear, and she wants you to just listen and hold space. And it's not the old adage that a woman only wants you to listen, not at all. But she's not blaming you. She's not directing anything at you. But you're reacting or responding in fear because you haven't dealt with that stuff. Now, when your inner child is settled and safe, your inner child knows, and the parts of your psyche know that this woman is expressing. I don't have to take this personally. How can I sit here and really serve her? And you're not coming from a place of fear. You're not coming from a place of pain. That's what you don't feel rejected, or you don't feel not good enough because you've done your inner work. And part of that inner work is working with the inner child. Now, I've said a lot there, so I hope I haven't gone off track, but I haven't gone down too many rabbit holes, and I've Hope I've succinctly answered your question.
It's an amazing answer, but it's true. It's like if I look for, when we go back to rejection, it's like if like I've been in this place multiple times over the last 10 years of my life where a woman I'm with is just like describing what's going on for her, like, oh, I'm feeling this way. And 10 years ago, I'd be like, fuck, this is all my fault. What did I do? How can I fix this now? What do I need to say? And then I would even go a step further and be like, okay, I need to counterattack.
Yep.
I need to hit her with some stuff that she's done. Then she'll either like nullify what she was talking about, and then I'm making it about me. Whereas now, as you said, like holding space, which I always I tell people about that. It's like I'm holding non-judgmental attention for someone else. I'm just holding the attention, and it's like it's a bubble of attention that I'm holding for this person, and it's not about me. There's no judgment in there, and it allows a woman just to like release whatever emotions there for her, like crying, shouting, whatever it may be, and you can just be with that. You can take it on with like loving care and compassion.
I love it.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, I can definitely relate. I've I had a thing like years ago where if I'm in a relationship and there's any upset, my first instinct was, oh, this is done. Like my reaction is like, oh, this is finished. This is like any small, there's no point, so you may as well leave. And my whole thing was to just push away. And actually, I became very in those moments. In fact, I didn't see this in my character until I was in a relationship. And when that would arise, I would become very vicious with my words. Like I could be very abusive in terms of like really pushing people away. And that actually shocked me, and that actually really made me aware of something that was underlying as an issue. But it really resonated with that from what you were saying. I mean, I had a question actually about like, what's the best way for any man to overcome his fear of rejection? But I think you've spoken into like a lot of the different tools and aspects. But is there anything else you would say, especially I suppose to someone who has heard these sort of concepts for the first time and is like now going, wow, I didn't realize that, one, that there was something I could do about this, and two, like that there was opportunities out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think simplicity is key, and so I would say confidence. Okay, so outside, working with a therapist or a shaman or a healer or a spiritual guide or a support group, and doing your own reading and doing your own personal practices and all of that, right? But outside of that, cultivating confidence, and then people may say, well, how do you cultivate confidence? Well, you can start with the aesthetics, start with the physical, because the physical is tangible and it's very visible. It's easy for us to see noticeable changes. When we're talking about the mind and the emotions, it's sometimes too intangible for people, and it's difficult to grasp. So just start with the physical. So start dressing a little differently. Now, I know this sounds maybe superficial, and it's not addressing maybe some core wounding, but we want to create some space for us to be confident enough to go into the deeper wounds and the stuff that's a little bit more. There was a reason why I was suppressed. Remember that. It was intense. So there's a fear of going there, and without support, you're not going to go there. But without some level of confidence, you're not going to go there. Start dressing a little different. Dress to your body shape and dress to wearing certain colors. I mean, psychologically, you can do the research. Just Google what colors are most appealing to the human eye, and you'll see what colors are most appealing, right? I would also start moving your body, train, exercise, strength train, build muscle, not to be aesthetically appealing that you look amazing and be 5% body fat and have the best deadlift in the world and you're the fastest runner, or you're the best fighter or any of that stuff. It's not for that. It's because when you take your body when you discipline yourself to wake up every morning or create a routine in your day that challenges you, because training hard is a physical challenge, and it requires discipline, it requires self-respect, it requires motivation, it requires focus. All those attributes that you're cultivating and developing makes you a more resilient human being. It gives you insight and trust and confidence into who you are, and then you bring that confidence into the world, not in an arrogant way, but in a way that is actually in humility. People outside of you will notice that. The feminine will notice that and is attracted and magnetized towards that. That will then build on your confidence. And we just got to be careful we don't stream into arrogance or ego too much. Not ego as in ego is a bad thing. Ego is great. It's just, I'm talking about arrogance, the shadow expression of ego. Okay, ego is just the way we identify in the world. And so start there. Start with building confidence, and then you'll notice that you're not so easily susceptible, if that's the right word, to rejection. You're not going to need to control so much. You're not going to have a fear that you're going to crumble, or that you need to resort to any extreme violence in order to have control of your environment. You get to learn how to say. I would also say start practicing saying yes and no. What I mean by that, and this is for everyone. But own your no's and own your yeses. So if you're a full yes into something, say it, speak it into the world. If you're a no, don't be a people pleaser. Don't say yes because you don't want to let anyone down. You have to practice saying no with healthy boundaries and compassion and understanding, and know that you're not always going to make everybody happy. I often say, and whether you're religious or not, it's irrelevant. I'll just use this as an example. Not even, and I don't mean this facetiously in any capacity, but not even Jesus could make everybody happy. He was crucified on the cross. So when you read agapistic ethics, when you read the New Testament, you understand what his ethics were promoting, which are very similar to so many other spiritual religions and spiritual practices across the world. You think, well, how would he be crucified for that? Like, it's just a beautiful connection, community, because you can't make everybody happy. You start to really understand that and believe that. Your beliefs start to inform your personality. Your personality begins to inform your relationships and how you move through the world. This is an important thing to understand, but just start with moving your body and dressing a little differently. Literally. And I don't mean, again, nothing wrong with the aesthetics. It's more for the virtues and the characteristics that you're building along the way through the process. That's the power in that. And that will help open up the space to delve deeper into why you're really struggling with rejection.
Beautiful.
Yeah, really powerful. I really like you say about discipline. It's like I used to train a lot, 4 times a week in the gym, a couple of times a week playing football. And what it built up in me was a belief that I can change things. Because I went from one body type to another, and I could discipline myself when it came to the food and the exercise. And it's strange because a lot of people always look at guys that go to the gym and often think, oh, they're just like arrogant and vain and blah, blah, blah. But they're some of the most disciplined men I ever met when I was going to the gym. Like, these guys would wake up at 6 a.m. They would have their set meals and all that kind of stuff. And you think these guys live self-discipline, and they can also put into action, meditation practices, which is a question I was going to ask you, is like consciousness practices. It's like a lot of people struggle to go, oh, I want to meditate every day for 10 minutes, and they can't do it. And it's like because they lack self-discipline.
Yeah. And so, when people start seeing the physical results that training can give you, how you're sleeping better, you've got more muscle on your shoulders, or your legs are getting bigger, or whatever it may be, you feel stronger, when you're wrestling and playing with your friends, you're like, oh, that feels good, I feel better. You start to see those tangible improvements. You then want to do more of it. And then you're still cultivating and creating more of these very healthy attributes, such as discipline, such as self-respect, such as self-honoring. It's really powerful.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Wow. What about kind of awareness practices? What sort of practices do you recommend for men?
So I'll give you a couple of generic ones. You mean awareness practices for what though? Just cultivating deeper sense of awareness of one's environment and oneself.
Yeah, exactly.
So our ability to focus in a world that's very, very busy and basically the whole world's becoming Vegas on steroids. I mean, you've ever been to Vegas, but it's sensory overload, right?
It
is.
And
so in a world that's very distracting, whether it be ads coming up on your computer screen, or when you're working, or when you're scrolling or watching something, whether it's ads, media, whatever it may be, we have to retain our ability to focus. So there's a nice little meditation, nice little practice that I recommend to many people, particularly those that are wanting to cultivate a deeper level of focus, is a lit candle meditation. So basically, light a candle. So you can be in a dark room. You don't need to be in a dark room. You can be in a lighted room, but light the candle. Sit approximately, I want to say at least 4 or 5 feet away. At least sort of 2 meters away, around there. 2 meters away from the candle, at least. 3 meters is fine as well. And just stare at the candle. Sit, lengthen spine, stare at the candle. Just stare at it. You can blink, but just stare at the candle. Don't move your gaze from the candle. Start with 1 minute. If that's too much, start with 10 seconds and just keep building up. And over time, every day, just keep building up. And it doesn't matter what you're thinking about, it doesn't matter what's going on in your brain, your mind, just keep looking at the candle. And that will help help you retain focus, give you that discipline. And focus helps expand awareness, because you look at something internally or externally long enough to become more aware of it. And there's a parallel drawn. It feeds, skills are usually cross-referenced in ourselves. So, for example, if you're applying for a job in a new industry, people will say, "Oh, you can apply for that job because your skills that you've learned in that industry are relative to this industry as well." It's like a cross application, right? So it's the same with our internal selves. If you practice focus there, focus will be able to be cultivated in other areas because you have a real life experience of it. Again, we're coming back to building confidence too.
Beautiful. That's so simple. Such a simple technique. Everyone can find a candle. Everyone can light it.
Yeah.
You just be willing to spend whether that 10 seconds or 1 minute or 5 minutes just looking at it. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Oh.
Well, just before we finish up, do you have any book recommendations that you think would be very useful for people?
Oh, on rejection itself, I'd have to think about that. I've got so many books back in Australia that I haven't. I've got a few books here, but I actually got one on rejection. I can't remember what it's called. It's back. I've literally got a suitcase which is about 100 pounds, 60 kilos probably of some of my, and that's not even all of my books back in Australia that I have to get my friend to FedEx to me. Let me think. Oh, rejection. You just, any book particularly, or something specifically on rejection?
I'd say any book, particularly. What book do you
Fire in the
recommend?
Belly. Fire in the Belly.
Fire.
Sam Keen. It's a fucking epic book. It's on masculinity. Fire in the Belly. Really good book. Really good book. I loved it. It's an older book, but it's a good one. Yeah.
Nice.
Wonderful. Cool. So as we wrap up,
I was just going to say there's a lot there's a lot there in this episode. Very meaty, but thank you for your generosity and with so much rich information. Like I'm still digesting some of what you said. I really appreciate it, and I know our listeners will too, because you've really looked at this the idea of rejection from different angles, and from the perspective of inputs, and how can we really say if rejection is real or not? Is it just a perception thing? And also then looking at wounds in different ways, and our childhood experiences or any traumatic experience that people have, and how that impacts our confidence. And I really love the simplicity of your advice around how men can improve on their confidence. I mean, because it's so true. And the interesting thing about that, I don't know if David, if you actually knew this, because when we started our coaching program, like one of the first things we do is we take a man out to the shops and we help them to look right in their body shape, right? We're not trying to change something. And it's so true. Like we've seen that transformation of people where they just feel great. Like a very quick and easy win is to change how you appear. So I really loved all of that.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. Yeah.
But so where can people find you? Where can people contact you if they want to work with you?
Yeah, at Stefanos Sifandos across my social media handles, and my website is stefanossifandos.com.
Cool. We'll drop those in the show notes for
Thank
everybody.
you.
Yeah, big thank you. The beautiful energy and the kind of passion that you've just brought to the last kind of 40-50 minutes has been incredible.
I
Yeah,
appreciate
beautiful.
that very much. Thank you.
Yeah, it's really a
And
pleasure having you.
it'd be great to have you over in London some point when this is all blown over.
Well, I was meant to. So Christine and I were starting to. Well, we were, and we will continue, of course. Once you're right, once this blows over, and it will blow over, we'll shift. In London, particularly, a lot more. And so we were meant to be in Europe 4 times this year. That's 2 of those times have definitely been cancelled. We may still go, but anyway, we were meant to be there a couple of times. So we will be there. And yeah, it'll be lovely to. We run workshops there, and we are going to start expanding that as well into 2.5 day immersives as opposed to just a 1 day workshop. So we're excited about that as well.
Awesome. If you drop us the details, we'll stick those in the show notes as well because we're London based. So I know plenty of people will be interested.
Amazing. I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for your time today. Looks like you've got a lovely sunny day to look forward to.
Yeah. It's a nice day today.
Beautiful.
Wicked.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's a wrap.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Thank you, man.